Excellent. Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. Good morning. Finally, the sunshine has made itself known to us. It's been a bit of a dreary week thus far. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Olivia Moriopoulos. I work for the Alzheimer Society of Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk, Hamilton, Halton. Quite a large catchment area, but I specifically work out of the Hamilton office. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we join into the session. A couple of disclaimers that I wanted to share with you, and you can see them on the screen too, that there are privacy measures that have been put in place by Zoom, and we feel that everyone's privacy is well accounted for. Now, of course, if you do have your camera on, just be in mind that we can see whatever it is that's behind you as well. But if at any point in time you feel more comfortable, you are always welcome to turn your camera off. And that goes for folks if they want to turn their camera on too, just for everyone's sake. To let you know that the purpose for today's session is for knowledge building. So obviously everyone's situation is very different to one another, whether if dementia is present or not. So just keeping in mind that things will be fairly general today. If you do have specific questions about your own situation or you would need advice, I'd recommend that you reach out to the Alzheimer Society and speak with our intake coordinator, and we can get you set up with some more programs and services, especially one of our counselors, so that you can have those one-to-one conversations if need be. And lastly, I will do my absolute best to answer any and all questions that you have. Please feel free to interrupt me at any point in time throughout the presentation because we are a smaller group today, but I will also leave time at the end for questions as well. And you have the option, you can put the questions in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and say them out loud as well. So lots of options. With that being said, I think we can go ahead and get started for today. So today we're going to be talking about the topic of living safely with dementia. And more in depth than that, we're going to be talking about one particular program that I think is phenomenal. Oh, I just realized the date on that is incorrect. My apologies. We're going to be talking about a program that's called Finding Your Way, but I'll divulge what that is in just a moment. Right. So for today's agenda, I'm going to put everything up on the screen here. And for those who are joining us by telephone, I'll reiterate it. We're going to be doing a very brief overview of dementia, having a basic understanding of what that term means. I'm going to be going over some statistics with you as well, specifically for Canada in regards to persons living with dementia and living safely as well. We're going to be talking about what is Finding Your Way, what is this program, where did it come from, and what are its uses and benefits. And lastly, we'll have time for discussion and questions like I mentioned earlier. So we're going to go right into it and talk more a little bit about understanding this term dementia. So rather than me, talking away at you and doing this lecture style, I'd like to be a little bit more interactive with all of you. So I'd like to ask the question for everyone here. When you hear the term dementia, what comes to mind for you? And again, feel free to use the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and say it out loud. So when you hear the term dementia, what do you think about?
Olivia?
Yes.
It's Maureen speaking. When I hear the term dementia, I think it's almost like your brain is changing, like your perception of the way you hear sounds if you're speaking, or your thought process if you're thinking, and it's just very hard for people to understand that because it's almost like your mind is cluttered, but you can't get it all in order. It's like it's all like a jigsaw puzzle. All the pieces are not fitting together.
Yeah.
You have some people nodding and agreeing with you, absolutely, and I agree with you as well. I think you described that really well, that your brain is changing and there are physical changes happening inside, physiologically speaking, to physical damage, if you will. And you're right, when you think about it, every aspect of your brain controls every aspect of who you are and your entire being. So there are going to be changes that come about. So that's a really excellent description. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to add? Sorry. Would anybody else like to add any other comments to that or share their own thoughts?
Sometimes I can't speak or something like that.
Okay. It seems to get stuck, kind of.
Yeah, sometimes there's no words at all, or there's sometimes I just have no words.
That's absolutely fair. I understand that. And you're right. You know, part of dementia, which a lot of people might not realize, is that somebody's language can become affected too. Not just your ability to talk, but also the ability to understand and comprehend as well. And like everyone else, you know, people who are living with dementia will have good days and you'll have bad days. Yeah. And that doesn't change whether or not you have dementia. We all have good days and bad days, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with me. I appreciate it. And you both hit it on the nail, hit the nail on the head perfectly. Sorry. I want to clarify something because a lot of folks might not know this, that the term dementia is neither an illness nor a disease. So it's not a disease or anything. However, the term dementia is a set of symptoms, a list of symptoms, if you will. And there are lots of different illnesses and diseases that can cause the symptoms of dementia. So for those symptoms, they may include a decline or loss of memory, not always, but most of the time. We may see a decrease in understanding, like I mentioned, the comprehension levels. We may also notice a decline in judgment skills. So when I mean judgment, what I'm talking about is like decision-making skills, deciding between what is right versus what is wrong, or what's appropriate versus what's inappropriate too, all depending on the situation. You may even start to notice changes in mood and behavior. And I'm going to talk about why all these things happen in just a moment. And lastly, just mentioned a possible decrease in language skills too. We just had a few more folks join us. Hello, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. I want to continue on by saying that dementia is not a normal part of the aging process. It's not supposed to happen, but sometimes it does. So really, what matters the most is how you cope with those changes. That's what really truly matters. One other thing to think about when you hear this term dementia, the one thing that you can always come back to is the brain. Dementia directly affects the human brain, and it affects the human brain by physically damaging the brain as well. So if we think about it for a moment, you've got lots of different lobes in your brain. Now, of course, the picture on the screen here shows the different lobes with different colors. Unfortunately, our brain's not that colorful in real life, but it'd be really cool if it was, though. However, we know that different lobes in your brain are responsible for different things. For example, you have a lobe on the back of your head. It's called your occipital lobe, and that's your visual processing center. So that's where all the visual information that comes in through your eyes gets sent to the back of your brain to be processed and to be made sense of. And the same goes for all the different areas of your brain, all responsible for different things. Keeping in mind, though, that all of these lobes talk to each other. They don't work independently of one another. However, when it comes to dementia, I mentioned the physical damage that can come along with that. If one particular part of the brain becomes damaged, then we're going to see some changes in the responsibilities and tasks and behaviors that are normally associated with that part of the brain. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that?
Olivia, it's Maureen speaking. I have a question. Like, which do you find like is more damaged, like the frontal lobe or the back?
That's
or
a really good
difference?
That's a really good question. And I'll answer it with this. Every person living with dementia is different. Everyone's type of damage, everyone's amount of damage, and where it is in the brain is going to look different from every person to person. So one person could have a lot of damage in their frontal lobe or their temporal lobes. Another person might have the majority of their damage in the back of their brain, in the occipital lobe. But again, it's different for every single person. Does that answer your question?
Can I
Yes,
ask
it
a
does.
question?
Thank
Yes, Maureen, please go right ahead.
Can you identify the parts of the brain in the diagram with the different names and what those areas control?
I absolutely
something that was last time.
Okay, I absolutely can. I will say that it's much longer. It can be made into a whole conversation, a whole other presentation on what the brain is responsible for. But just to give you a few little tidbits of information, and I do encourage you to do some, excuse me about that, do some more research later on as well. So just to go over quickly, the frontal lobe of your brain, the one that you can see on the screen that is blue, and for those folks who are joining us by telephone, this is the area of your brain that is sort of sits behind your forehead, all the way up to almost the crown of your head. This particular lobe of your brain makes you you. It makes you an individual that you are. It's responsible for your personality, your different characteristics. It's also responsible for things like executive function. So critical thinking skills, making decisions, planning ahead, organization. That's what you'll find mostly in the frontal lobe. In your temporal lobes, which you have two of them, one on either side of your head where your temples are, these are mostly associated with memory and language skills as well. Now, each temporal lobe does it a little bit differently, but that's sort of the general overview. There's another lobe that you can see on the screen that's purple, and it's called your parietal lobe. And this one sits right below the crown of your head, right at the very top. And this is what you can call the analytical center of your brain. So, for example, mathematics, numbers, perception. So, for example, being able to understand the world in 3 dimensions. Hand-eye coordination is also sort of responsible for this particular area of the brain. And then lastly, like I mentioned, the occipital lobe, the one that's green on the screen as well at the very back of your head, is your visual processing center. So that's sort of a very, very brief overview of the different lobes of the brain and what they're responsible for. And it's not important for you to remember those specific details. What's important to remember is that depending on where the damage is in somebody's brain, we're going to see changes in those particular skills and behaviors. So Maureen, does that answer your question?
Yeah, 2 questions.
Yes,
what is the
very
red
good.
section at the bottom? And which part of the brain has control over body functions?
So that's a really good question. Actually, so the red section at the bottom of your brain on the picture there on the screen is not really considered to be a lobe of the brain, but it is called your cerebellum. So your cerebellum sits very closely to your brain stem, which then leads into your spinal column, obviously. And the cerebellum is what is mostly responsible for your body's functioning, the things that you don't normally think about exactly. So your dexterity, your fine and major motor skills, things of that nature. If you're thinking about, for example, the urge to go to the bathroom, being tired, being hungry, those things are found within the limbic system of the brain, and that's the center of your brain on the inside. And again, that's a whole other conversation, but again, I do encourage you to take a look a bit further. And I will say this, I am not a neuroscientist by any means at all. So that's just a very general, brief overview.
It's all I would understand.
Yeah. Excellent. So we're going to move on now, just to give a little bit more perspective on this term dementia, because you heard me say a little while back there that dementia is neither an illness nor a disease. So then what is it? So dementia can be thought of as an umbrella term, a general overview term that a lot of different illnesses and diseases fall underneath of. So I'll bring them all up on the screen here right now. There are 4 major ones on the screen that you'll see. We have Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and frontotemporal dementia. Now, the reason that these particular names are on the screen is because these are the 4 most common types of dementia. However, keeping in mind, there are well over 100 various causes of dementia, over 100. So it makes sense as to why it can take a physician so long to diagnose somebody with dementia, because the physician has to rule out every other single possibility before they can land on one particular diagnosis. That makes sense. You'll also see on the screen here, for each type of dementia that's listed, they have a percentage beneath them. Just to clarify, Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, accounts for between 60 to 80% of all people living with dementia, depending on which reports you read. The commonly accepted number is about 64%. And the other 3 most common types of dementia are within that 1 to 20% range. I want to show you a few more numbers because, folks, the numbers don't lie in regards to some statistics for our country right now. At the moment, we have well over 500,000 people in Canada who are currently living with dementia, well over that number. Actually, within the next 9 years, we are expected to surpass 1 million people living with dementia in Canada. The next number here is that approximately 76,000 people in Canada are diagnosed every single year with dementia. One thing to keep in mind as I show you more of these numbers, take them with a grain of salt. And the reason is that these are only the people who have been to a physician and have been formally diagnosed. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands more individuals out there who probably have dementia but have yet to be diagnosed. So again, take it all with a grain of salt. The next number I want to show you, oh, actually this already mentions it already, but again, by the year 2030, again, we're inching very close to that 1 million mark. So what we're trying to say is that it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to become a bigger and greater need for general public health as time goes on. And lastly, about 1 in 5 persons experience being a care partner for someone living with dementia. So there's a very good chance that somebody that you know in your life, maybe it's yourself, has or is currently a care partner to someone living with dementia. So folks, the numbers don't lie. I want to throw out a few more numbers to you, especially in the context of living safely with dementia, because this is why we're here today. It's what we're here to learn about. So right now in Ontario alone, remember that about over 500,000 people in Canada, half of those people live in Ontario, to give you perspective. Now, of course, we have a very large population in Ontario, and that is one of the factors, obviously. But right now in Ontario alone, the statistic is that 6 out of every 10 people living with dementia will go missing at some point in time throughout their journey with dementia. So that's 60% of individuals have a risk of getting lost, going missing. And we understand what the ramifications can be, especially the half of those individuals, half of those 6 out of 10 are sometimes not found within the first 24 hours. And of course, that can have dire consequences for the individual and for the family as well. Interestingly enough, about 3/4 of the people who do go missing are found within about a 3-kilometer radius of where they were originally lost from, whether that was their home, the shopping mall, the grocery store, wherever it may be. So they're usually found very close to the vicinity. One thing that I want to really make quite clear is that if a person living with dementia goes missing, it is an emergency and it should be treated as a medical emergency and such. which means that as soon as someone goes missing, if you are not able to immediately find them, you call 911 because it is a medical emergency. Someone's life is at risk. So we're going to talk a bit more today what some other resources are, especially from the Finding Your Way program. But I really wanted to make the situation quite clear to all of you that this is something we all need to be aware about. This is all something that we can help and support other folks with. So the next question is, why does it happen in the first place? Why do persons living with dementia go missing sometimes? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. And usually the person living with dementia has a very good reason for why they walked off and left somewhere. Whether it's the fact that they're feeling restless, they haven't had enough opportunities to expel all this pent-up energy and they need to get it out somehow. Maybe they're trying to continue a habit or an interest from their past life. We know that with memory loss that's associated with dementia, normally we see short-term memory loss as quite a common symptom. And so because of that, those people who experience short-term memory loss, they rely very heavily on their long-term memory. So information from days gone by. And so the individual might be trying to get to work, even though they've been retired for 15 years. Maybe they're trying to get home, but their home is not the same home that they currently live in. Again, there are lots of different reasons, or maybe the individual just really loves going for walks, and that's something that they've always done and they want to continue to do. Relieving boredom. Sometimes we all need to, like I said, just get up and stretch our legs. If someone is feeling anxious or nervous about something, we're all very prone to pacing and wandering when we feel anxious or nervous. So especially so if for a person living with dementia as well. Lack of physical activity kind of fits into the restlessness part as well. And lastly, there might also be the possibility of the confusion of time of day. So for some folks living with dementia, disorientation in time and space can become a common symptom. Excuse me, sorry about that. So for confusion of time, we might see that they start to mix up sunrise with sunset, so that dusk and dawn start to become confusing times possibly. And if we think about it too, as we go through our day, we get increasingly tired as the day goes on. And usually by about 4 p.m., 5 p.m., we're all tired. We've had a long day. And when you're feeling tired, the possibility for becoming confused is at a higher risk. So I've thrown a lot of information at you just now about the statistics, the numbers, and also some of the possible reasons about why someone may wander. Keeping one thing in mind, a person living with dementia almost always has a very good reason as to why they're behaving a particular way. There's actually a terminology that we use to describe behaviors that are commonly associated with people living with dementia. And that term is called responsive behaviors. And what it means is that the person is behaving in a particular way in response to something happening to them. Whether that something happening is external or they're feeling a certain way or they're experiencing a certain thing. But what it also means is that their behavior has meaning behind it. There is a reason as to why they're behaving the way they are. And it's the job of a care partner, a friend, a family, a neighbor, whoever it is, to be the detective and figure out, okay, why is it that they're behaving this way? What are they trying to tell me? Because behavior is a means of communication as well. If you think about verbal communication, think about nonverbal communication. If I'm feeling upset or angry, I'm going to cross my arms and have a frown on my face. And you don't need to ask me, but you can look at me and tell, oh, she's upset about something because I'm behaving in a particular way. So just keeping those things in mind. And with all that being said, are there any questions at this point that I haven't answered yet? And again, feel free to use the chat box if you like. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions, whatever you prefer. I know it's a lot of information to soak in all at once. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we're going to continue on, but again, please stop me at any point if you do have questions. So we've talked about, why this may possibly happen. We've talked about the numbers associated with it, but now we want to talk about what can we do about it? How can we support someone living with dementia so that they can live as safely as possible? And what do we do even if this occurrence does happen? Because sometimes you can't prevent it from happening, but sometimes we just have to deal with the outcome or the ramification. So this is where this is where the resource Finding Your Way comes into place. So actually I will say this is the home web page of the Finding Your Way website. So just a screenshot. Now, Finding Your Way was created by the Alzheimer Society of Ontario. Don't ask me what year, I think approximately 2015, but that's not important. But the reason that this program was created was because that the folks at the Alzheimer Society of Ontario noticed that there was a need. The risk and the incidence occurrence of folks going missing was getting higher and higher. And so they wanted to create something that could hopefully prevent that from happening in the future. So I want to take you through the website really quickly and show you what resources there are and how you can best use them. So first things first, at the very top, there is a tab called Living Safely with Dementia. And these are e-learning modules that you can go through. Now, keeping in mind, these e-learning modules, so these online courses, if you will, are dementia friendly. So they are open to anyone and everyone, whether the person has dementia or not. This is a screen that you get when you click on that Living Safely with Dementia tab, and these are all the different topics that you can learn about in those e-learning modules. It's very well laid out, it's color coordinated, it's easy to read, and it's quite accessible. And the one other thing that I like too is that even though they use animations, the animations are not childish and they don't infantilize anyone. So I find they're quite respectful in that sense. So let's say hypothetically, we click on nutrition and food or living alone. This is one screenshot or one picture that you might end up seeing when you're going through those e-learning modules. So obviously this is an image of somebody's kitchen, and the activity on the screen is asking you to review 6 objects that can create a safer living environment for a meal being a person living with dementia. So you have the opportunity to click on the knives, the stove, the smoke alarm, the fire extinguisher, etc. And as you click on each object in the picture, they give you suggestions and strategies and tips and ideas on how you can create a safer living environment, again, for those living with dementia. So I really do highly recommend, and I'll put the link to the website in the chat box a little bit later on, but I do recommend going through this website and actually walking through those e-modules because they really have a lot of excellent tips and ideas. Another resource that was created by Finding Your Way is called their identification kit. For short, we call it the ID kit. Now, in my personal opinion, if you are caring for somebody living with dementia, you need to have one of these filled out. One, if not multiple. And I'll explain the reason why. So let's say the unthinkable happens and the person you're caring for with dementia goes missing. You call 911 because obviously it's a medical emergency and the police show up. Now, of course, the police are going to start asking you for a description of this individual and where and how they can find them. But in the moment, you're feeling anxious, you're nervous, you're upset, all these emotions, and you can't get your head straight. There's no way that you can answer all those questions. Oh, how tall are they again? What color are their eyes? Because who can remember that when they're under such stress? So filling out an ID kit helps to relieve that stress because in the moment, when the police officer asks you for that information, you say, here, officer, here's everything you need to know about the individual. Now, keeping in mind, this is only one page of a 6-page document, maybe 6 or 7, I could be wrong. 6 to 7 page document that can be filled out. The interesting thing about this particular ID kit is that it is dementia-centric, meaning that they ask questions specifically that would be pertinent to a person living with dementia. So for example, where are some common places that this individual likes to frequent? Is it the local library, the Tim Hortons, their friend's house, or do they tend to go off in the same direction normally? Sort of small details like that that you can't really get from a physical description of an individual. Now, of course, a physical description is obviously very handy, but they also ask in this ID kit things about medical history. Is the individual at risk? Do they have a heart issues going on or any other type of medical issues? And at the very back of the book, or booklet, I should say, there's an open space for you to paste in a picture of the individual. Obviously, a recent picture would be best if you've got it. But again, everyone also has their phones now. So if you can keep it on there too, that's quite handy. Now, I really do recommend that you have multiple copies of this filled out, one in multiple locations too. You've got one in your car, one in your bedside table, just places that you know you can quickly grab it when you need to. And if you can, updating it on a regular basis too. This document is free to print from the website. So if you click on the download identification kit button, it gives you a PDF copy and you can print it off easy peasy. Are there any questions about the ID kit in particular? It is, and it has been, and I'm very serious about this, a lifesaver in many instances. And it gives you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that you don't have to try and rack your brain for all this information when you're already under such levels of stress. A few other options. Sorry, go ahead.
Is that something that needs to be done online, or is it an actual kit that we can get from the Alzheimer Society?
Yeah, so you have a few options. Obviously, you can print it off from the website and then fill out the physical copy. Or if for whatever reason you don't have access to a printer, you have a few options. You can come to the Alzheimer Society. We'll print one off for you. We can even help you fill it out if you like. You can also head to, I think, the Hamilton Public Libraries. They have lots of access to printers too, if you wanted to go there as well.
Okay, all right, thanks.
You're very welcome. I will say this, that if at any point in time you have questions or you're looking for more support and you just don't know where to start, calling the Alzheimer Society is always a really good first step. We have what we call a no wrong door policy. So even if you need help with something that we can't necessarily provide that help with, we are going to find somebody who can support you. So there's no wrong door to knock on, essentially. The next thing I want to talk about is getting even more ready for plan B, essentially. So, what do we do just in case? What kind of safeguards can we put in place to give ourselves better peace of mind? One thing that we I don't know if we invented it, but we certainly created it at the Alzheimer Society is what we call our one-stop binder. So this is a package of information about the individual living with dementia, and it's all information is in one place. So the kinds of information that you'd want to keep in this particular binder would be points of contact. So family physician, dentist, optometrist, next of kin, anyone who would be supporting the individual on a regular basis. Next, you'd want to keep is a list of medications. If you've got to make an emergency visit to the hospital, this is so handy because the healthcare folks or healthcare workers will be asking you about medications that are being taken. And again, in the moment, you're stressed, your head's all over the place, and it's so much easier to have this information all in one spot. You'll want to keep maybe a notes section as well, writing down any bits of information that you think are pertinent. So for example, visited the doctor on June 2nd. Here's what the doctor had to say. Just keeping brief notes like that so you can always refer back to them. And lastly, of course, you want to keep the ID kit in there too, at least one copy. I want to show you a quick video that was put together by Finding Your Way. And this really well and whole-roundedly describes all the programs and services that they have on this website through this particular program. If for whatever reason you can't hear the video, please let me know. Those who are on the phone, you should be able to get the gist of everything as well.
6 in 10 people with dementia become lost at some point. The balance between independence and safety is a delicate one. Locating technology can be useful for those living with dementia and for care partners by helping to create a safer environment or monitor from a distance. While being lost is distressing and has the potential to be dangerous, having a safety plan and a locating device can shorten search times and may reduce possible harm. The Finding Your Way website provides many resources to help people living with dementia and care partners decide if locating technology fits within their safety plan. On our website, you can find important information about features to consider when choosing a locating device, as well as possible limitations. Also provided are examples of available locating devices and their features. This may help to explore whether a device could increase safety for the person living with dementia. Although locating technology can be a helpful part of any safety plan, it is also important to complete an identification kit used by police if a person living with dementia does become lost. You can download an identification kit from our website, or find information about enrolling in a registry such as Medic Alert Safely Home or Vulnerable Persons Registry. For more information and to learn about other programs and services for those affected by dementia, please contact your local Alzheimer Society. You can find your local society by using the search feature on the Alzheimer Society website at www.alzheimer.ca.
Oops. Awesome. So again, that just gives a quick synopsis of some of the information I've already said to you. It gets reiterated and also shows the importance too. So again, I do recommend that you take a little bit of time and check out the Finding Your Way website. Again, the website is www.findingyourwayontario.ca, and I'll put that in the chat box before the end of our session today as well. So folks, that's it from me in regards to my presentation, but I'd like to open the floor now for some questions, for some discussion, whatever it is that I might not have answered at this point in time already. I'm just typing that website in the chat box as well. But please ask your questions away. Is it Daria or Daria? Daria?
Either or is fine. I have a 90-year-old mom who kind of pre-dementia, and she has this habit of just sitting in the chair and talking to herself.
Okay.
And she can, go on for a long time. Sometimes I can tell, like, she doesn't live with me, but she lives very close. I can tell when I call her, she's very, kind of agitated and out of breath. And I'm thinking, I bet she's just been in one of these mental conversations with, it can be anybody. And I'm just wondering, is that something that's typical of people with dementia? Or happen?
I would say, yes, I have heard that before, where the individual seems to be having a conversation with themselves, but it's almost like a form of self-regulation. Now, you did mention that your mom lives alone. She does live alone though, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, that could be something else too. Maybe she's possibly looking for social stimulation, and that's one way she can provide that to herself. Now, the only thing where, if that were to be of concern, I would say, if it starts upsetting her and makes her angry or something along those lines, if for whatever reason, she's just having a conversation with herself or just chit-chatting away, and it's not really seeming to be upsetting her very much, then really no harm, no foul, I would think. But to answer your question though, yes, I have seen that. I'd actually heard of it happening before though.
Thank you.
No problem.